If you're a woman who's been hesitant to lift heavy or build muscle, worried about getting too bulky, or confused by all the conflicting advice about gaining weight, this episode is for you. Join me and strength coach Nikki Sims as we reveal why most women are leaving massive gains on the table, and how understanding the science of strength training and muscle is a game changer for giving you confidence with your fitness so you can finally just get strong. Learn why the fear of getting too muscular is holding you back. Discover what actually drives muscle growth in women, and get practical tips, as always, to start thriving in strength. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today we're going to utterly dismantle one of the biggest barriers holding women back from reaching their physique and longevity goals with the one and only Nikki Sims.
Oh my gosh. Hi.
She's like, I'm just Nikki. Now, for those of you who don't know Nikki, and come on, if you don't know her already, go check out her stuff. She is the Chief Experience Officer at Barbell Logic. She's host of the Beast Over Burden podcast. Definitely give that a follow. She spent over a decade helping women overcome their fear of building muscle and getting stronger, which we're going to talk about today, while transforming her own relationship with training and nutrition. By the way, she loves deadlifting. Check out her Instagram profile.
Best.
Good stuff. She's up in the 4 plates. And I, for one, am a huge fan and stoked to talk with her today. So you are going to learn today what drives muscle growth in women. You're going to learn how to bulk strategically without getting bulky. You're going to learn how to break free from some of the myths and mindsets that hold you back. And stick around, because Nikki will be giving you plenty of tips as we go along to get started later on in the episode. Nikki, thank you for coming on the show.
What an intro. Man, it's good to be here.
It is awesome to be here. It's so much fun to meet somebody who I've followed for a while through Barbell Logic. You know, we talked about before recording, I came from the starting strength community and I've shared a lot of your videos with folks. So anybody who's looking for really good form checks, go check out your YouTube channel and then definitely follow the podcast. But I want to talk about what we're here for today, which is, do you find that many women fear their own physical potential?
It's a really good way to put it, at the base of what might be happening inside them. And I think they're fearing what they might have to look like in order to be strong, because there's such an instant image that pops into most people's head when they hear I have to put on muscle, is that of like a stage ready bodybuilder, or someone who's gone really far and very successfully far down the road of putting on as much muscle as they can. And so I think they're afraid that's what they are hearing that they have to become, when it's really not the case. That may not be the journey for them. And if they want to do it, you don't get there by accident. You know, you've said this a million times. That doesn't happen on accident. That happens with a lot of hard decisions and a lot of hard work. So yeah, I think when women are hearing this conversation about needing to put on muscle, or hear that they should put on muscle, it's a fear of what could happen to them. And it's something that they don't want to happen to them. And that's always worth digging into to learn more about what those words like bulky really mean to them. Yeah.
Yeah, because a man might hear that and be like, heck yeah, let's bulk up, you know, and it's a different intonation or implication. It's funny you mentioned it can't happen by accident. You wrote a really good article about this whole topic and get pretty vulnerable in your thoughts on this. And you said, if you don't want to look bulky from muscle, I'm sure you won't. You said that. So, I mean, let's just hammer that point home. I'm still surprised, having been in the industry for, 4 years now, not a huge amount of time, but long enough to even see trends evolve in that time, that this is still a big fear. Let's explore that. Why is that? Is there marketing behind it, or is it just a lack of clarity with the information out there?
I think it's a fear because, especially I think women in my age group, and I'm in my late 30s, I have, I think, less than 2 weeks in my 30s, counting down the days. We grew up with this idealized image of Kate Moss, or in really thin actresses. And there were even a lot of movies and magazines that told us what it meant to be fat. And we were probably all that weight range, which was a healthy weight range. And so there's this and it was, shoved it into our brains when we were really young and still developing. So it's really hard to break away from this idealized image that part of our brains still think we need to look like that. And we're afraid to be far away from that from those physical characteristics, which are really skinny arms, super duper flat stomach, the worst jeans ever, which are the low rise jeans. Like you can only wear those if you are really, really thin, which if you are, that's great for you, whatever. But it's like a fear of not being what we really thought we were supposed to be.
Yeah, you mentioned like Kate Moss. I know the SNL 50 thing is going on, and there's like all these actors in there, and you can kind of see some of the standards, the beauty standards. And I know for guys like Brad Pitt, the Fight Club
Yes.
thing gets thrown out all the time.
Yep.
And but to the credit today, like you're seeing some of the bigger guys, like I don't know if you've seen Reacher on Amazon Prime, that guy. It is definitely a double standards. It's not like you
Mhm.
see women, big, strong women coming out in these positions, in these roles even
Even in the
today.
superhero rows, they're
Yeah.
like weights.
Yeah.
I was like, "I wouldn't even trust you to
They
pick up a
wouldn't survive.
15-pound dumbbell." Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. There was a movie called The Gorge with like a
I
sniper, and
just
she was,
watched that. Yeah.
wasn't it good? Wasn't it
Yeah,
good?
it's fun.
And what's her name? Joy's in her name. You might
Yeah,
know her
Anna
whole name.
something, like, yeah.
Yeah. And with the big eyes, and she's doing all this athletic stuff. And, some of it actually makes sense if you're thinking of the calisthenics part of it and like the acrobatic part of it. But then she's also
Mhm.
supposed to be this like superhero, strong and everything. She's
Yeah.
kind of small. But
Yeah. And, some
uh,
people are genetically certain ways,
sure,
and
perfectly
when
fine.
their
Yeah.
bodies are left to their own devices, meaning they're not trying to change them, they might end up being easy gainers, or it might be really hard to gain weight. And,
Yeah.
we're left thinking about these things. Like when you start to get into the industry like you
Yes.
of changing bodies, you cannot help but think about that stuff when you're watching someone whose physicality is part of their role. Is like, I
Yes.
know what you have to live like to look like that, and you can't do it for long.
Yes. And then when it bleeds into clients, then you're like, now, wait a minute, let's take a step back and focus on what we really are going for here. And maybe that's a good segue, Nikki, into
Yeah.
talking about strength and talking about like the things we can really go after from a performance perspective, even if physique is a little piece of that.
Mhm.
I mean, what does strength mean to you? And as a woman and more generally as a human, and maybe we can go off of that tangent.
Yeah. And even just this pivot is important because it's going from this kind of outside like image of what you think you should be
Mhm.
and how you should be seen to something that's yours, and like being in your body and making choices about your working out and your training. It's about how you interact with the world. It's about how you eat. It's about how you feel. It's about how you sleep. It's how your whole 24 hours actually feels like, how you're able to experience it, how you're able to take ownership over it, versus someone looking at you from the outside and you thinking that you should look a certain way to them. So now we're really pivoting it to something that we cannot control, to something that we have a lot of control over and we can actually get a lot of joy and rewarding feelings out of. And I think that's such the way you pivoted, I think, is really just a great example of why it's really important to actually start thinking about, okay, well, how does it feel to be on the same team as my body? And how does
Yeah.
it feel to see what it performs like and looks like when I'm in a good relationship with it?
Yeah, it was in my notes here. It says when Nikki says this, you want to pivot to the strength topic. I'm just kidding. I like how you said it is the locus of control. I don't think you
Yeah.
used the word locus, but I know that's what you were
I don't
meaning.
think I've used that word, but
And
I'm going to
okay,
now.
okay. And all these things are terms that I steal from other people over the time.
Yeah.
So I'll take credit for all of them, but none of them are mine. And you said taking ownership of your 24 hours, or to
Mhm.
paraphrase, which is amazing because I do see a mindset shift with people who are struggling and feel like they don't have control and don't have confidence and they're not sure what they're doing doesn't translate to some result. And that's a lack of control, right? And they might even do things that are extreme, like dieting, and then it
Mhm.
doesn't work. And so
Mhm.
this idea that, wow, you could become a beast, right? And then you can
Mhm.
conquer your burden, to take your
Yep.
podcast title, and kind of mold your physical relationship as a physical relationship with yourself in terms of your relationship with strength. So, I mean, maybe dive into that a little more because I want to know, you've talked about going from skinny to strong. Why is it important, I guess? Why should people care about that, being strong at all?
Being strong is a different way of being in the world. You
Mm.
are able to do so many more things than you ever knew you could. And you start to really understand what your body is for. I think a lot of people can just get completely tied up in being in their head, and they have no relationship with what it's like to exert their bodies. There's so many people who are just so completely sedentary, living on the internet, doing whatever, but have no appreciation for what it feels like to contract your muscles really, really hard and to earn fatigue and to realize that you can do a single chin up, which maybe you thought was just something completely impossible, or to squat your own body weight. There's this whole world of feeling that before you really get into it, you don't know exists. And when you do learn about that, and once you get into it and feel what it's like, it's so hard to go back. you know,
Ooh,
once you
I
know
love
what
this.
strong feels
Yeah.
like, you can't not be it. It's like too devastating.
I totally jive with that
Yeah.
100% because yeah, it's like a different version of yourself emerges from this cocoon you've been like
Yeah.
sedentary in. It's like the Matrix. What you're saying, it's like you taking the red pill or whatever the pill is that like
Yeah.
shows you what it could be.
Yeah.
And you're a human, right? Like, so I just interviewed Brad Kearns. I think his episode comes out before this one. He co-wrote a book with Mark Sisson on the value of walking, right?
Oh,
Born to
cool.
Walk. It's
Mhm.
walking versus running. And the whole premise is just our relationship with the world.
Mhm.
When you talk about, walking barefoot or, sprinting or lifting heavy things or playing, those are human things. What are many people doing? It's the opposite of those,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they like both our bodies and our brain can be really victims to hormones or
Mm,
they can
mm,
create hormones that we really want. And so interestingly, those chemical reactions can make us feel out of control. But when you get organized in your training and you get organized in your eating, your ability to understand what's going on increases and you can experience less stress by feeling like a victim to those hormones and even just your own thoughts. And so when you become more physical and when you interact with the world through your body, I think you can be a lot more accepting of yourself.
mm. Yeah. It creates acceptance and also maybe resilience from that.
Yeah.
You just said something very powerful. You said get organized with training and eating, which hits a nerve for me because I talk about physique engineering and using data and tracking, and I know you guys do as well. And
Mhm.
just today, I think, or yesterday, somebody who had like dabbled in my group program, she's like, I think this is going to be too overwhelming because I have 3 kids and you're asking me to track things, right? And immediately I thought,
Sure.
okay, I've seen this story before, right?
Mhm.
Because you've got to meet people where they're at. But also, I think people don't necessarily realize how valuable it is to get organized in that it reduces the stress eventually if you kind of
Mhm.
get over that hump. Well, tell
Yeah.
us more about that. When you say get organized with training and get organized with eating, what does that mean?
It means appreciating that your actions today may not be felt until 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks later. And your ability to appreciate or to feeling a payoff is not instant anymore. And it can be wildly rewarding, but what it feels like in the moment is you do a workout and instead of the goal being complete exhaustion and no longer able to do any more reps and you're just totally done. Or you look at your fitness tracker and you see, oh, good, I burnt 600 calories. That's great. Like, that's not the reward anymore. The reward is a cumulative effect where you're managing your stress and you're managing your recovery. And change happens over a longer amount of time, but it's very much a lasting change. It takes a lot of work to build muscle. You can start to see the effects pretty soon if you're new to training. But when you look at people who are really jacked, they've been doing it for a long time. And you can really appreciate how much work went into that. And when you watch people make really significant body composition changes, it's so hard. It's so hard to make those decisions every day and to kind of learn how to be at peace with the discomfort of saying no to things that you really want to say yes to. But the end or actually, there's not even an end anymore. It
Hmm.
becomes infinite, and that's another mindset change is, when you're organized with your training, it's just this repetitive cycle of learning, trying something and learning, trying something and learning, instead of the mindset of, "Well, as soon as I do this, I'll be happy." Huge shift.
There's no endpoint. We're
Yeah,
we're so on the same page, man.
it's
There's a buddy of
forever.
mine. He's another lifter. He and I are like Socrates philosophers. The way we get into the same kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and we're like, man, we just love the process. You really fall in love with that process, even though it's always hard. Like, I think that's
Yeah.
an important message. It's never easy, but like the things that come out of it make your ability to interact with the world way easier, I would argue, right? And I think you're arguing that to some extent, in that the
Mhm.
things that become hard with age and frailty are not going to be the hard things you have to deal with as much, because you're dealing with you have the voluntary hardship today, right? Which is the
Yeah.
term you guys use.
Yeah.
You also said you become at peace with discomfort, which is again amazing, because it's the concept of ever changing, always changing and growing, and not just sitting back. So, what are your thoughts on like dopamine hits and endorphins from exercise, which get a lot of play out there? That is an instant
Mhm.
gratification, is it not?
Oh, yeah, and I love that shit.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. I am here
awesome.
for it. And I think it's important to have stuff like that in there, but it does change over time.
Mhm.
A dopamine hit for me now, like, I do spin classes. I live across the street when I'm in California from a great spin studio, and that has sometimes a probably positive effect on my conditioning, but sometimes I can go too hard with it and it actually steals from my recovery. I accept this. But in that space, it is a huge mental break for me. And it is such a win that I come out of there less stressed. And so that's a huge win. So that's important. But I also know that is not contributing to my muscle building. It is
There you go.
not how I lose weight. I don't care how many calories I burn. It is just for fun. And other dopamine comes from, or dopamine hits can come from, marking your workout complete. That counts.
Yep.
Same as, or not even as big, but hitting a PR. Boom. That's a huge one. The interesting part of that, though, is you hit a lot of PRs in the beginning and you get addicted to that, but it's not going to happen very much, as you know, as you keep lifting. So it's not a huge like, this is the best. I'm only going to get better and better. You're going to squat 225 a million times in your life where it used
Yep.
to be your one arm. Yeah.
Your new PR is my shoulder didn't hurt after
Yes.
those presses. Yes.
Yeah. So
Uh,
you have to know, like, and you've experienced this, like you have, 20% of your workout days are full of those kind of dopamine hits. Like everything's awesome. You hit some PRs or it's just a really good day. And then some days are the complete opposite. Like nothing feels good. You have an
mhm.
old tweak that's acting up. The music is crappy. And even though it's your own music, but today it just sounds so dumb and you cannot get into your workout and you just want to throw a tantrum. But you could do the exact same work and have 2 different experiences, and your body still needs it.
I feel you all the way. You just look for those wins, whatever it is. Like I was joking with some buddies where I had 395 on the bar and they're like, why don't you just go to 400? I'm like, well, the math works out that way because I'm progressing. Last week I did 385. I'm doing 405 next week. And I actually responded something nerdy like, I'm holding my mental reserve until I go to 4 plates next
Yeah,
week or something.
sure.
You know what I mean? And they're like, gave me shit for it. But yeah, and if you look at Nikki's game face after she does her deadlift on Instagram, you can see this like satisfaction right after that rep. That's
Oh my
just
god,
a
so
subtle
good.
difference, right? It's like, yeah. Or, some people like, I will clap myself, I'll be like,
For
yeah,
sure.
it's good stuff.
Such a good feeling.
So before I do want to get into the whole building muscle science and everything, but before we do that, is there another extreme where you can be like too strong or too muscular? I just want to get that out of the way.
Sure. Well, I talk about this with nutrition a lot. I don't love saying that a certain food is healthy or not because I think it comes down to the quantity of any food, like
Agree.
cashews. You might hear that they're healthy, but if your diet only consists of cashews, not so healthy, especially if you're trying to not gain body fat. So, similar to training, there can be a point at which the pursuit of muscle actually starts to deteriorate your health, which could be, if you start using supplements that, if you start using a lot of steroids, like that can have a very ill effect on your heart. So it's whenever you start doing things that are at all costs. How is it influencing your internal organs? How is it influencing your connective tissue? Are you able to enjoy your life outside of the gym, or are you just saying no to everything because you're too exhausted, or you believe that the only way you can obtain joy is by being the most muscular person in the world or for yourself? So if you start making trade offs for your health, your heart, your joints, and in your life outside the gym, then I think that that can become too much. It's probably not what you actually want.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that in the
Yeah.
context of you've got a system is your life. Like you've
Hmm.
got more things. It's not that they have to be in quote unquote balance. I don't like that term necessarily because things get more important sometimes and then less others,
Sure.
in my opinion. But you're right. I was thinking about how some guys push the deadlift so hard that they might have some low back fatigue, right? Or they're doing a bunch of RDLs or whatever. And now their wife asked them to help out with something. They're like, sorry, I'm too sore for my lifting. And it's
I've
that
definitely done
thought
that
goes
before.
through my head when my wife's like, the cinder block is frozen to the ground because it's like 9 degrees here. Can you pick it
Mhm.
up? Now, in that case, I couldn't get it, but there's something called leverage. So if you're an
Yes.
engineer, you know you can use a pull. So anyway, that's a good one. All right. So let's get into the building muscle. So where do we want to start? Let's start with you because some of my followers, I said Nikki's coming on, they were like gaga about it and they
Oh,
wanted to
yeah.
hear some of your story. I don't want to do the whole thing here, but the skinny to strong, right?
Yeah.
And then specifically, like we want to hear about bulking phases you've gone through, and then maybe we could parallel that with some of the
Okay.
generalities and science behind it.
All right.
So yeah, go for it.
Short story was I was a gym rat in high school. I tried to play sports. I was terrible at it. The coaches were like, "What have I done? She's tall and useless." And so like team sports were never for me, but I loved being at the gym, which eventually led me to meeting CrossFit. And I really enjoyed CrossFit. My boyfriend at the time and I we were just doing it at the gym, like some sort of pull-ups and squats and whatever. And then a gym opened up and we started going to those classes. And I really, really enjoyed it. I loved the community. It was the first time I had fun working with the barbell. I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember doing really dumb things like really ugly power cleans. And this one I'm really embarrassed to admit, but I have used a band and added weight to myself to do chin ups, thinking that I was doing weighted chin ups.
Interesting.
Very shameful. I wake up at night and just like, oh, I can't believe I did that. But that's what, and like no CrossFit coach was like, that's not really working, which is like such a
So
it's
you
a
were just making yourself heavier, but then still using a band.
yes,
That's
just
okay. Interesting.
I didn't know what I was doing, but
I get
I
it.
think pretty shortly after that I had $1,000 in a weekend, so I went and got a CrossFit cert. And I started just coaching at that gym there. And I was working in construction management at the time. That's what I got my degree in. But I wasn't happy there and I was happy at CrossFit. So I was like, all right, let's leave this job and start doing CrossFit full time. And then I did the other thing that always happens in CrossFit is you believe you can do it better than than they're doing. So you open up your own gym. So back in, I think it was 2009, we opened up a CrossFit gym back in New Mexico. And so lots of barbell fun, taught me how to build community. And it was 4 years later that I encountered starting strength, which totally that flipped another switch of, oh my gosh, I just want to get strong. And now I can see that there's a program to do so. And that sounds amazing. So the joy for CrossFit decreased and the interest in dedicated barbell strength training really increased. And so I pivoted from CrossFit to becoming a private or personal strength coach. I'll say it that way. Moved to San Francisco, moved to Atlanta, and that's when online coaching started back in 2016. And then eventually wound up here in SoCal working for Barbell Logic online coaching. So through that journey, it was like kind of being a gym rat, getting more into the barbell via CrossFit, and then just boom, full barbell.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it sounds like me. I mean, not to make it about me, but it's so funny because I was in CrossFit for 8 years
Yeah.
and my coach who owned the gym, he kind of evolved away from CrossFit himself. He was more into just straight up lifting and powerlifting and
Yeah.
whatnot. And then I discovered starting strength in like 2020 during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's funny how many people came that route. And that's how I found out about you guys too, because I know you kind of branched off from that. And a few other guys like Barbell Medicine,
Yep.
met Jordan on the podcast too and stuff.
Mhm.
So, okay, so that's like the what. And it's good people understand like, hey, CrossFit, there's maybe a place for it. There's the barbell piece, there's the community. There's definitely
Mhm.
a lot of things that are maybe detrimental, especially if you go too crazy with
Yeah.
it and you can
Yeah.
get injured and stuff. We all know this.
Well,
We
I
all
think
know
there are
that.
3 pathways. You find out you're really good at CrossFit and you become a CrossFit athlete. That's
You're
for,
athletic. Yep.
not that
Okay.
many people. You get hurt and you leave, or you get into barbell training.
Yes. Yeah, you don't get great results and then you go into barbell training. All of
Yeah.
a sudden the world changes.
And that's where we are.
So that's what people want to understand is like, okay, What happened? Like, so you're still doing that because obviously it's given you something. Did the change happen pretty quickly? Like your strength doubled in a few months doing the novice linear progression?
Mhm.
And what did that look
Yeah,
like? Yeah.
it did. Yeah, and I had been, doing CrossFit for many years by the time I did the novice linear progression, but yeah, I got much stronger. I wish I could remember my numbers, but I remember being stuck at a 200-pound squat for a really long time. Definitely got past that eventually. It took me ages to squat 300 pounds, but I finally did it. But like getting to 2 plates
There's
was
a lot of
really
guys that
fun.
can't do 300.
Yeah.
So
After that, I was like, cool, I'm retiring the squatting.
I get it.
Just kidding. But yeah, I think I got my deadlift up to fives at 265 at some point, maybe more. I can't remember, but that was like pretty good in the CrossFit world. So, even with going to the gym that many times and being that invested in what is the CrossFit phrase? Constantly varied functional
Functional.
fitness.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I wasn't as strong as I could be. And
Yeah.
so I got stronger once I had a dedicated program.
Right.
And then even since then, I've gotten stronger, as evidenced by weight on the bar in certain lifts. But I've only continued to put on muscle. And while not all my numbers have gone up that entire time, I have put on more muscle.
That's an important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's link that to what you did to make that happen, right? There's obviously the training and the lifting, and then nutrition's a huge part of this.
Yeah.
So over the last, when did you starting strength? What year was that roughly?
13. Mhm.
Okay, so it's been a
Yeah.
little over 10 years. So it's been like 12 years. What did the nutrition look like? And when did you do some periodization, like your first bulk, for example,
Mhm.
or first cut or whatever? How does that look?
Yeah. I think one of my most notable bulks was it wasn't really an intentional bulk, but it was a really stressed out bulk 'cause I
Okay.
I got divorced and I wanted to leave my gym and I moved to another state. And then I didn't have anywhere to live. So it was like in a year, I left my gym and I moved to San Francisco and I had to live in this Airbnb until I found a place to live. And I was so stressed out. Like I was just eating jelly beans thinking that I need the carbs to lift and enjoying San Francisco, which is such a fun city. But I got up to my heaviest, which I think I was like 185 at my very heaviest. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I do not like this at all. And I think my lifting was going well, but I was so uncomfortable in my body. So I did a cut through macro tracking. I did
Mhm.
if it fits your macros, and eventually got down like 30 pounds to 155, and I competed in a meet at that time. So since then, my body weight goes as high as 170, 172, and that's as much as I'm comfortable. I don't feel comfortable above 170, and
Mhm.
it's not a payoff in my training anymore.
Okay.
Like, I've
Yeah.
gone through the period of, like, if I add a bunch of weight, I'm gonna get stronger. No, that's not gonna happen to me anymore. In fact, it just makes me really uncomfortable. And really, to add muscle, you don't have to be in a tremendous caloric surplus. You really don't.
That's
It's
right. Yeah.
not 1,000 calories a day. It's like 300 calories a day, depending on how much you weigh going into it. So that's another interesting
What?
thing to take away from this is like, you can do go mad. You can put on a
Yeah.
bunch of weight. You will get stronger, but I don't think you need to go to that extreme.
Yeah, GOMAD's a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't even do GOMAD if I tried. It's just too much milk. But
Yeah.
it's funny because you say it's only 300 calories, and I know when I see typical bulks, it's like between 150 and maybe 400 calories. For the average person, and for some
Mhm.
men, it might be higher, right? But 300 calorie surplus might sound crazy to a lot of people listening, or a lot of
Yeah.
women listening. I want to address that topic of the fear, not just of getting bulky, but specifically gaining weight on purpose
Mhm.
because I did a podcast episode recently or right before the end of the year called like the most underrated fat loss secret keeping you from getting strong. And it was basically like you need to gain weight. Like that was the
Yeah.
spoiler alert. It's like you might be dieting too much. So I kind of want to
Yes.
address that because you just mentioned it doesn't have to be getting fat. It just has to be
No.
strategic. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so important to learn how to do that because if you are in a mindset of thinking that you need to work harder and eat less, you actually really end up setting yourself back, sometimes quite significantly, because you're more likely to get hurt and you can't progress in your training. And if you can get into a little bit of a caloric surplus as much as you're wanting to do and comfortable doing, you end up learning what it feels like to feel really freaking good in the gym. and it is fun. It's
Yeah.
really fun. And that whole lesson of recovery and how it's fueled by your nutrition is a big one because undereating and overtraining is it can be really devastating. I went through a period of doing that and that's where I was my most injured. And that has set me back in a few ways for a really long time. And the mindset, and I think this is really important for women. You don't have to max out your energy expenditure when you're training. And it's like working out is not the reward for, or it's not the punishment for eating. The goal is to feel energized when you're training and to train 4 times a week. You don't have to do it 7 days a week. You don't have to feel starving. What if you felt really powerful and good while you're working out and you could end a session excited for the next one because you know you can do more? Such a different way to be.
It is. And again, going back to one of your recent posts on IG where you did like doubles, I think it was for 300, whatever. It was like sub max doubles on your deadlift. And you said, this is recoverable. Like you're like, I'm
Yeah.
done. And this is, it was a good turn. Like at first I'm like, do you mean, did you get injured or something? What do you mean? And I'm like, oh, she's talking about the fact that she's managing her stress and recovery to come
Yeah.
back a few
Do
days
more.
later, a week later and
Yeah.
do more. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Cause it's not, you're not burning calories. You're not trying to get your heart rate up. You are
Yeah.
training. You're training
Yes. There's
and you're
more.
powerful. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's more.
There's gonna be
and
more
it's-
time.
It never ends. It never ends,
Yeah.
but that's a good thing. So, okay, so this whole calorie surplus thing then, I know there's some different fears that I hear a lot about like not wanting to push too hard. Like you talked about your comfort level at whatever that was, 180 or you said 172
170
is,
something. Yeah.
and I imagine a lot of women don't quite know where that is yet. Or even what would you say to someone who the only time they've ever gained weight in the past was accidentally and it was fat because they weren't training.
Yeah.
Why is this so different?
This is different because your calories are going to be coming from food that's really useful to what you're doing, meaning you know how much protein you're getting and you're also filling in the calories with fruits and vegetables and fiber and nutrient dense
It's
food.
not Pop
So
Tarts,
it's
not
not
all
a
Pop
bloat,
Tarts.
it's not
Got it.
sugar, it's not booze. Yeah. And there's a place for stuff like that. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to have, those delicious things in
Mhm.
there, but it's coming from a place that's driving your body growing in a good way, building muscle. And it's also at an amount that you are in control of. It's not an uncontrollable amount, it's not an uncontrollable rate. And so it's not a runaway train of Girl Scout cookies. It's a strategic amount of increase. And so you're still in the driver's seat and you know that you get to have fun with that weight.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I will say, like, there's definitely discomfort when you're strategically gaining weight and in terms of like how you look, because you are what I have found for myself is I will only compare myself to when I was very lean. And I forget about all the other days that existed when I wasn't that. And I will decide that I was at my happiest at this moment in time.
Mhm.
And I imagine that I was like that all the time. And that's not the case. And especially with women, you go through like so many changes throughout the month. You basically get 4 of you for the price of 1, where you're like really happy and lean, and then you're really fluffy and tired. And we can sometimes only remember or believe that current reality is the forever reality and forget like all of the cycles that actually exist. But the discomfort that can come from gaining weight, I think can be solved by knowing that it's not forever and something as simple as wearing the right clothes. It's such a hack, like, that I find is really worth it. Like, you might have clothes that work really, really well when you're at the skinniest part of your cycle. And you might have clothes that make you look freaking amazing when you're in like the thicker part of your cycle. And you're like, play to the strengths of your body. I think it's totally fine to do that because if you're trying to gain weight, you are going to gain circumference in places. Get the clothes that look good on you.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's honestly just like torturing yourself.
Yeah, and resolve to the fact that you're going to need different sizes and probably forever. If you're going to periodize like we do, I know I have
Yeah.
2 or 3 different sizes of different clothes, and I'm like, all right, these shirts no longer fit right now. I'm going to switch to these
And
loose
you'll
ones
look
over
better
here.
when you put them on,
Yeah,
and then you're like,
yeah,
"Oh, okay, this is okay."
yeah.
And it's
It's no
like
big
just
deal.
the
Yeah.
number on the brand. Like I wear so many different brands, and the sizes aren't consistent, and we can get into a whole destructive thought process around
Yes.
that. But like, you're building your body, show off what you're building. It's not easy, but do yourself a favor and like celebrate it because it looks really good when you start getting thicker legs and a thicker butt and your back gets muscular. Like, get a new sports bra that shows it off. Don't get the one that's just like is all pinchy for size 2 girls. Not
Yeah.
worth it.
I agree. And as a man, and I am married, and I love my wife, she's attractive, and this is not but I can tell a woman who lifts and is strong, and even if
Yeah.
she's totally dressed up, you even see it in the face, but in a good way. Like there's this muscularity, there's a strength there that's really good. And I like the way you reframe all that because some of us gain fat in different areas. And I hear that comment as well, like, well, I gain it all in my stomach or I gain it
Mhm.
all in my butt. I'm a guy, I gain it in my butt. It's weird. And
Oh.
you gain it in certain areas. Yeah, right. And so you're like, but embrace that because maybe
Yeah.
maybe that helps your leverages or your squat or whatever. You never
Yes.
know.
And, like, it
Yeah.
needs to be there. It's
Yeah. It's gotta be
discomforting
there.
in the times when you're looking at yourself in the mirror in a certain light, in a certain outfit, but it's really good when you are deadlifting, when you are squatting, when you are benching, when you are actively trying to build. You cannot build if you don't have enough.
Mhm.
And so once you do it and you put in the work and you see your new shape, it's really, really fun because it took a lot of work.
100%.
Oh.
Yeah. And it happens fairly fast. If you're a beginner, it happens fast. And why wait?
Mhm.
Like I always say, why
Mhm.
wait? Somebody reaches out and they're 60 years old and never built muscle. I'm like, don't wait. Don't wait till you're 70. Do it now.
Yeah.
I also
Mhm.
have, there's a male client I have who's never built muscle in his life, older client. And he's like 3 weeks in and already expressing some of these fears himself. Like it happens to men
Mhm.
too. He's like, I'm
Mhm.
feeling frumpy, I'm feeling puffy, and some of these symptoms are more of a fluid retention
Yes.
issue
Yep,
initially.
very
Maybe,
helpful to know
yeah.
that.
And maybe we could talk about that. Does your body adapt to that? Is that something you have to get used to? Like what's going on with the glycogen in the water?
Yeah, when you're training, your muscles now have a reason to hold on to more glycogen, especially if you're eating carbs like you should be.
Mhm.
So that's good. And you might see some of that fluid retention and weight gain from creatine when you start taking creatine. And it's great. Take that as well.
Mhm.
And also just know that when you don't want to see that bloat, you can make it go away very quickly. Like when, for example, when bodybuilders get ready to do a show,
Oh
to
yeah.
from what I understand, they don't do legs for like a week or something. And you would think they'd be doing a bunch of legs, but like a big heavy leg day, it makes you retain more fluid and you'll even see that in your waist measurement.
And the scale.
Yep, and the
Yeah.
scale.
You'll see it
Yeah.
pop sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will drink a ton of water to
Mhm.
get their body to start releasing water as an
Mhm.
adaptation, and then they'll stop drinking water, and then they'll release more water and get dehydrated.
Yes.
Right. To go
Yeah.
along with what you're saying is avoiding the inflammation from the bigger.
Yes.
That's pretty cool stuff to understand
Yeah. So even
when
when I
bodybuilders
do
manipulate it.
like my
Yeah.
measurements and I'm just like, okay, well, these are the measurements after like a mega leg day, they're going to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
That's
that's
good to
that.
know too. If you have like
Mhm.
a shifted training schedule and then you're taking measurements the same day every week, that might throw
Mhm.
off the numbers. It's good.
Yep.
Good to know.
Yeah.
You said a couple other things I wanted to address. One is the duration of a bulk, what you like, because I've heard different recommendation from different experts. I have my own thoughts. Like I think you should bulk for plenty, like 6, 9, 12 months if you can help it, just to kind of get into that super anabolic mindset. Just keep going. But you also don't want to gain too much.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on length of a bulk?
That would have to do, I mean, a big kind of buffer I would put there would be your waist measurement. The classic waist measurement that is correlated with more health risk is a 40-inch waist for men. Like if your waist starts getting over 40 and you're not like a huge guy who's also super muscular, that is a measurement where when you're around that range, you're like, okay, this might be the time to pull it back a little bit and get under 40 safely for a while. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then thinking of what you want, because if you're bulking for a year, you have to think, well, what do I want the next year? Am I okay with this? Do I just want to do a little cut and be like 5 pounds lighter? Am
Mhm.
I actually really happy? you know, are you doing this for you? Or are you doing this because someone said that it's important that you can lift a certain amount and the only way you can do that is by gaining 40 pounds? I think it's always just
Right.
a question of, is this what you want now, 6 months from now, and maybe like a year from now? I've been thinking just in the time scale for women, like when we get into this age range of early 40s, when our body is just going to be like, hey, did you enjoy yourself? Did you have fun? Well, too bad. It's over now. Like, I'm just gonna really mess with you for the next 5 years. Like, it becomes so much harder to lose body fat. I feel like this kind of ticking time clock now where it's like, I don't wanna go into the throes of menopause with extra body fat because
Mhm.
it's only gonna get harder to lose it, and I don't wanna have to fight that battle as much as I might have to if I go in with a lot of body fat. So I'm trying to, like, prepare for that part of my life by being muscular and, comfortably lean because I don't wanna have to be, without any estrogen and exhausted and mad at the world and fat.
Yeah, and you're hitting on like what we know is the main cause of like a dropping metabolism in menopause is the hormonal changes causing muscle loss,
Yep.
which then you gain fat because you're not eating any less, and then it just spirals.
Yeah.
So going back to the bulk, if we
Sorry.
tie this to no, it's okay. No, it's all related, right? It's good to know. If we tie this to you're only 40 years old, Nikki. Just you're
I
young.
know.
You're so young. You got years to go. I'm 44, and yeah, I'm younger than I've ever been. That's the way to reframe it, right?
Yeah.
So if we go way back to a comment you made about like a 300 calorie surplus, I don't know about you. I like to use 2,500 calories per pound for
Oh,
building
okay. Uh-huh.
because of like the density
2,500
between
per
fat and
pound.
muscle. And if you assume
Okay.
50-50 fat muscle, blah, 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 all the nerdy stuff. It comes out to like 3.6 pounds a month. So that would be then like 40 pounds for a year if you just build.
Mhm.
Now granted, if you were going to build for a year, you might not want to go that aggressively and,
Mhm.
can make all the trade-offs. So that's kind of like what I was asking. I like that you came from the perspective of, well, you don't want to be too big for metabolic health reasons. You
Mhm.
also don't want to be uncomfortably large where now you're just like a far cry away from your lean goal.
Yeah.
So is there a minimum though that you're like, you got to at least build for a certain amount of time in a
What
surplus?
kind of experience level are we talking about?
That is a good question. I guess we're talking to people who've never bulked before, so we can go with early, intermediate kind of deal if they've been
Mm,
training for a bit.
mhm. And, like,
Yeah,
on the thinner side.
that's another good question. Let's say for a male, what are we talking about? Let's say 20% body fat, where you actually do have a little bit of fluff,
Mhm.
right? And you haven't gotten
Mhm.
all the way to as lean as you want to get, but maybe
Mhm.
you had a fat loss phase to get you there. At least it's a common situation I see where people have a lot of fat to lose. They lose some of it. They're not quite
Mhm.
there, and then they want to build.
Yeah, I would man, for someone like that, they probably first we need to figure out what they're actually eating and get to, like, a stabilized caloric intake.
Mhm.
And it's very likely that, I'll probably start with 4 to 500 calories a day extra because their training is going to go from nothing to something big, you know, and see how they respond to that. I like to give nutrition changes 3 weeks of consistency before I make a change. And if I find that they're feeling energized, they're recovering, and if I do see a half a pound to a pound a week of increase, then we're in a good spot right there. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I
Mhm.
like that you said start a bit aggressively because again, people are afraid they're going to just blow up and gain a bunch of weight. But
Mhm.
are you doing that because you know there's this hump to get over, and also perhaps that your metabolism is going to start ramping up because you said the training becomes like you have more volume in you, more
Yeah.
intensity, the weight's going up faster, all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, you go from squatting 95 pounds a week, and then, not that long after, you're at, like you almost double that, and there's a delayed onset of nutrition
Mhm.
effect where, it goes both ways, unfortunately. Like, you can be in a deficit and not really know it, and then you feel it 2 weeks later when you're just like, "Oh my god, I feel terrible when I'm
Yeah.
training, like, I'm just so under recover." And it's because, well, you might have been in a deficit for a while, and now you're
Accidentally.
realizing
Yeah.
it because your training output is really high. And
It's
same
it's the
thing.
hunger during a build that people talk about. They're like,
Yeah.
"How am I hungry?" I'm like, "Because you actually need the food. You're
Just hasn't
actually."
happened yet,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, when you're about to really increase the amount of tonnage someone is working with from 0 to thousands and thousands, you need to prepare them, and you need to prepare the habits because it takes a while to figure out how to get 150 to 200 grams of protein a day. You're really changing how you're living by where you go to the grocery store, what you buy at the grocery store, learning how to prepare chicken in a way where it's not gross, like so there are a
Mhm.
lot of habits that have to be established, and so it's okay to, like, get that moving along pretty quickly.
Yeah, for
Takes a
sure.
while. It's a
Totally
skill.
agree.
Yeah.
And the good thing about a bulk, I would say is, or maybe tell me if you agree or not, but like it's asymmetrical, like fat loss versus bulking. It's not really two sides of the same coin. Like bulking, you have all this energy coming in, right?
Mhm.
Fat loss, you're really stealing lots of resources from your body. So
Mhm.
it's not like they're just the opposite. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally
Yeah.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very different
Yeah.
way of experiencing the changes and making choices. When you only have so many calories and you're in a deficit, you're like, well, should I have this piece of bacon or should I have this type of meat? And it's like when you're in a surplus, you're like, "I'll have both. It's great. Life was good."
It's true.
Yeah.
Where's the next one? I don't have
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
have to
so
like really
yeah,
partition your energy and be
it's
like,
true.
well, I need to make sure I have this amount by this time or else I'm going to become a hangry monster at 4 p.m. So let me make sure I do this. And like you have to math out your day so much differently because it just you're hungry and sometimes all you can think about is your next meal. It's really hard.
Which is another reason you want to bulk a lot if you can. Like if you can spend a lot of the year not dieting, I should say,
I
not
agree.
necessarily all, you know,
Yeah.
which gives you then, what are your thoughts on having more muscle and having a higher metabolism? And I ask it because I feel like there's some myths or people overestimate the contribution of muscle mass to calorie burn. But I do think the fact that you can carry more weight and you have
Hmm.
more muscle and you can
Hmm.
train more with more
Yeah.
load and tonnage, that's what burns more calories. But what do you think?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand, there are some people that have to get down to like really low amounts of calorie to lose weight. And that's pretty
Mm.
challenging, even
Yeah.
when they are muscled. There's definitely a genetic range in there.
True.
But if you do have that, I call it like it's an expensive tissue to maintain, which is what I want. Like I want that muscle tissue because it needs a lot to be happy. That is beneficial because, like you said, you can burn more calories while you're working out, even though it's not exactly what matters as much. It's
Mhm.
just that you can burn more calories between your training sessions and you get to eat more to support that, which is really way more fun. Like some of my friends, when they're trying to lose weight, like they're down and like 1,500 calories. And I'm just like, wow, I'm at like 2,100 in a deficit. Like,
Mhm.
that's too
And that's
bad.
all carb difference right there too. You're like difference in keto and like 150 grams of carbs or something or
Yeah.
200. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And speaking of that, you did mention earlier, we joked about the Pop Tarts, but we are on the same page. And I think people need to understand that you need to be eating a lot of whole food and nutritious foods that support your performance, but
Mhm.
there's plenty of room for other indulgences in
Yeah.
there and you should have a flexible diet. So I don't think there's no
Yeah.
argument there. How much time do you have, by the way, just to the bottom of the hour or a little
I'm good.
past?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
I'm okay. The
Okay.
next
I
thing
could
I
talk
have
to
is
you all
lifting
day.
after
So
this.
just beware. No.
As long as our listeners can tolerate me.
No, no, no. They're good. We sometimes go just a little long.
That's fine.
So I guess when we talk about women being bulky and the physique side of it and the muscle, you mentioned earlier, you can get stronger at some point. The muscle keeps going. What is that like? Where does that come from? And then what's happening? And then what does that kind of look like for a woman?
Yeah. The way I learned this was by getting really hurt.
Okay.
And I that happened because I was training really, really hard. I was doing jujitsu 3 to 5 times a week and I was lifting really heavy 4 times a week. I was very, very lean. So I was not recovering. And it was during that time when I hurt my back. Don't have a diagnosis. I don't know what happened, but I can say my ability to lift kept decreasing, which meant my ability to perform a squat and a deadlift to the full range of motion, I was unable to do without pain, and the amount of weight I could do in any range of motion decreased to the point where it was zero across every way. And, that's a huge identity crisis
Yes.
because this is what I do
It's
for a
discouraging.
living.
Yep.
It's what I've
Sure.
been doing for like almost 20 years. Like, what am I going to do with my life now? I'm also a coach. I got to figure this out. And I just knew, okay, if I can't do those lifts that I have built my house upon, I still need to build muscle. What am I going to do to build the muscle? So it went from this shift of, just being dogmatic and thinking like, if I can't I must do these lifts and I must see the weight on the bar go up, to thinking like, well, this is what I can do. How do I do the right amount? What is challenging like, and what does progress look like? And so that shifted to going to the gym, using machines that I could do, learning what machines I couldn't do, doing unilateral work, doing isolations, and also having to manage that work because if you don't really pay attention, you can be at the gym and do a lot of machines that are kind of make you tired, but it's not really useful.
Mm.
And so it went from figuring out how big of a movement can I do, just like we do on a squat. You're using your hips and your knees and your back. How close can I get to simulating that kind of training movement. And then I would just kind of dial it back to being more isolated based on how I was feeling during that time. And eventually I was able to get back to squatting, even though my back still doesn't really like it, but I was able to get back to deadlifting gradually over time. But I was able to still challenge, whether it be one muscle group at a time or several muscle groups at a time, in a way that was hard but doable and recoverable. And so amazing. You can still build muscle and you don't have to squat. Even though I still advocate for the squat, just for the record.
Yes, yes, and it is not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
And what you're saying hits really hard with a lot of people as they get older and go through training, either training injuries or just injuries from real life. Usually that's where you get injured. It's just
Mhm.
life. And
Mhm.
myself included. I had a back surgery, an appendectomy a month later,
Oh,
and
man.
then rotator cuff surgery last year. And through each of those, it's kind of like, oh no, I can't do certain things, but what can you do? Like, what
Yeah.
can you do? And
Mhm.
there's even this like cross education effect where you can use one side of your body and it will translate to maintaining muscle on the other. So no excuses, people, right? Nikki's
Mhm.
telling you that like you can learn from those experiences.
Yeah. Get out of your comfort zone, go to the
Yeah.
gym. I know a lot of listeners probably make fun of people in the gym doing God knows what, but when you are in this position of not being able to do the things that worked in the past, like it's time to start having an open mind
Get creative.
and get down to the principles of hard but doable and recoverable. And
Yeah.
you can make that work in a lot of different domains.
ABT, always be training. I just made that
Yeah.
up, but yes, always be training. It's funny because the people I follow now, I also came through starting strength and, they get accused of being a little dogmatic, but they're for a certain population. They're for the
Yeah.
novice who can
Mhm.
do all these things. But like Andy Baker, you mentioned, he was just on the show talking about
Mhm.
all the ways you can squat if you don't want to
Mhm.
or can't do low bar, or if it's not right for you, right? Like if you're trying to hit your quads and build those suckers, that's not going to be the quote unquote
Yeah.
optimal to do that.
Yeah.
Lauren Colenso Semple, she was on the show. She's in Mass. She talks about machines being
Mhm.
just as effective if you're, like you said, using the movement pattern. So people, you can train no matter what. And so,
Yeah.
so with that in mind, what would you say are the non-negotiables besides finding a way and doing it consistently?
Mhm.
What are the non-negotiables when it comes to building muscle for women that they have to have their pillars, their foundation?
I think you gotta squat
Cool.
because
Yep.
you move your hips, you move your knees, you learn how to engage all of your abdominal muscles, all of your back muscles, and you just get such a big bang for your buck. It is such a crucial part of a training program. And if you can't squat, I recommend a leg press, although there are a lot of different leg presses in there that vary
Mhm.
from great to crappy, or a belt squat, but like a big leg movement. Also, deadlift. Pretty much everybody can deadlift. I don't know if I've met anybody who couldn't deadlift, but that is a really important one because you are very likely going to lift the most amount of weight that you possibly can in a deadlift. Depending on how
Mhm.
you're built, it's going to be the deadlift or the squat. But you can impart such a huge training effect on your body. It's so much more impactful to do like a couple sets of 5 deadlift than do like an hour-long Orange Theory class. Like, it's
I'm so glad
huge.
you said that. I was doing rack pulls the other day. And I'm like, I know what you mean. You just feel it
You gotta
everywhere. It's
take a
just great.
nap right
Yeah.
after, like, it's big, but you
Yeah.
gotta spend some time buying into that. Like, it takes a
Yeah.
while to build everything stronger together. Usually what happens, and that's when we see, like, the back start to round and the deadlift is usually the form breakdown. There are a lot of little muscles going on in the back. It's a huge system of joints and insertions and origins, and at a certain point, parts of your body are gonna become stronger than others, and so it's kind of gonna feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back for a while, but over time, you learn how to be strong as your whole self, and that's what I love about the deadlift, and I think this is what some people experience with a squat. I think I've maybe done, like, 4 squats in my life where I'm like, "Yeah, that felt good." But, like, you learn how to
I'm so
like
with you there.
yeah.
No wonder I like you so much. Like, I love the deadlift.
The
It's 100
deadlift is the
pounds
way.
more than my squat. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you feel like you can use your every cell and be completely present with what you're doing. I have never felt what I have felt in a max deadlift in anything else in my life. Like, it is the pure experience of being alive and doing something huge, and it's so fun, and it you gotta learn how to do that because like I said, I just don't think there's anything like it.
My God,
So
I
unsheavy
trained
those
this
things.
morning and I want to go out and do a deadlift
I
already
know, right?
today.
It's
I
the
need to recover.
best.
But it's so good. It is so good. Seriously. Have you found people with back pain feel better after they start deadlifting?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Just
Yes.
so people are
Mhm.
aware, that's a
Yep.
thing. It's a
Mhm.
very common thing.
And women who I train who are pregnant, they're like, "I just wanna squat. It feels so good. I just wanna squat." And I'm like, "Okay, well, we can also maybe take out your deadlift." And they're like, "No, my lower back is just like," they have relaxin, so the hips are, like, separating, and
Mm.
learning how to brace actually feels really good. So the deadlift feels really good for them too. So those 2 movements, I think they've gotta be in your game at, varying degrees over time, but those are so big. And then you gotta do some upper body stuff too. I think rows are really, really important. Bench pressing, overhead pressing, multi-joint movements where you can eventually move a lot of weight.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'd like to give a big shout out to my nutrition coach, Philip. With his coaching, I have lost 17 pounds. He helped me identify the reason that I wanted to lose weight. And it's very simple: longevity. I want to be healthy, active, and independent until the day I die. He introduced me to this wonderful little app called Macro Factor. I got that part of my nutrition figured out. Along with that, is the movement part of nutrition. There's a plan to it, and he really helped me with that. The other thing he helped me with was knowing that I need to get a lot of steps in. So the more steps you have, the higher your expenditure is, and the easier it is to lose weight. When it's presented to you like he presents it, it makes even more sense. And the other thing that he had was a hunger guide, and that really helped me. So thank you, Philip.
Yeah, it's kind of a off the wall question because when I think of rows, I also think, people do a lot of mid back type rows, like the
Mhm.
barbell row, or they'll do more cheater style rows, like upright angles. But I don't think a lot of people put as much credence into rotator cuff health and scapular retraction type, like higher
Mhm.
level rows. What are your thoughts on that? And like maybe your favorite types of rotator cuff specific work?
Man, that's a great question. I can't say I've gotten too nerdy in that. It's
Okay.
usually like shoulder vegetables, like where it's like you gotta eat your broccoli. So like banded work or like face pulls, stuff
All
like
phase pull,
that.
sure,
I don't
sure.
know if these count, but straight arm lat pull downs, those just feel really good.
Oh yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, yeah, straight. I'm kind of
Yeah.
almost like a pullover, but standing. Yeah,
Yeah, those just
yeah,
feel amazing.
nice.
Dumbbell rows, you can have a lot more variety on, if you're how much weight you're doing, you can change how you're raising the weight if you're pulling it back towards your hip or if you're changing the angle at which you're rowing. And with that type of accessory work, I found times when it's useful to, go for the heaviness and others where they have a really good place in your program to be used with an eccentric or a pause
Mhm.
because then you really actually start to feel what it's like to use your rotator cuff and to stabilize your shoulder and like, oh yeah, that feels really, really good, which helps your bench press and, all
Yes,
the big
all of
things.
those movements.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's, I mean, at least I see it like shoulder health is probably,
Yeah.
other than low back, probably the most common complaint for people. All
Can
right, just
confirm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of lifters and coaches have their own personal experience with that too. Okay, so the last piece here I think I wanted to cover, you mentioned it a couple times, was the longevity piece, and also you talked about living in the world functionally, being useful. How does the physical strength relate to the mental resilience in that longevity? So by longevity, I didn't just mean health span, although that is important, but more of the training longevity and the mental longevity and the stress resilience and all of that stuff that you kind of alluded to earlier. Am I making sense?
Can you phrase it one more different way?
Let's talk about mental health and the
Okay.
impact. Let's do it that way. Just say
Yeah,
mental
that
health.
sounds great.
Yeah.
So the way I have found it to be useful is it teaches you how to be present with something. And in a world where we're so easily distracted, that really becomes a skill to hone. When you have the bar on your back or in your hands, you are rewarded for how present you are. You do not want to be distracted. You can tell when you're trying to think about too many things, and you feel how great a rep can be when you're focused on like one thing at a time. What does it feel like to be in my midfoot? What does it feel like to place my knees here? And that's such a great place to be in your brain. And I like to keep my entire training sessions present. I hate when I get down in an email. I don't even like to look at my phone when I train anymore. I just want to listen to my music and I want to do my lifts and to have that kind of sacred space where you can let your brain breathe and just connect with your body. I think having that spot in your calendar is really important for mental health, or else you're spending the rest of your day in a really kind of reactive territory, most likely. So I think that's a big one. And also, we touched on this earlier, but taking responsibility for yourself. It's your training, it's your eating, it's your body. You are the one who's responsible for it. And you can blame stuff on your coach, you can blame stuff on your parents, but you're the one who's making the choices. And when you train for a long time, you learn what you have to, I guess, roll with in terms of like hormones and energy fluctuations and injuries and stuff like that. But you also learn how to succeed because of what you do and the choices you make and the resources you start to call upon. And that's fun to learn how you can win and you can feel successful and at peace with yourself.
Mm. I'm glad I asked you the questions. So
I think about that one
I just
a lot.
want to sit on that. No, for real. Like, just you said, we're being rewarded for how present you are. I really love that. And it actually is a good kick in the pants to me too, because when I lift, sometimes I get distracted by emails or whatever.
Yep.
And then the opposite would be like you said, just being mindful. Even if you don't listen to music, try that. I've found that that's an interesting place to be too, because then you can like almost talk to yourself about the cues and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is feeling the midfoot when I'm deadlifting and when I'm squatting. It's the ultimate cue. Like if something's wrong down there and you fix it, probably something or two or three other things are going to click into place. And that's a fun one because I don't know, I just always feel much stronger when I figure out what that feels like. It's a fun one to warm up with too.
And I know you're a good coach. You probably look at form checks and you can just see that tiny bit of deviation, in the toe or the heel and be like, okay, that's what we got to work on. And you also said taking responsibility, which I totally agree. I definitely see a dichotomy in there in the lifting community between the folks who are kind of committed to it and they, no matter what happens, they're like, I'm going to learn from this and I'm going to keep going, versus the ones who are like, excuse. It's like, it's not my fault. It's something else. Sure, it's going to happen to you. So what? What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. And that can look like program hopping. It can look like getting the instant fix that is being pushed on you on Instagram, biohacking. But when you train for the long haul and when you coach someone for the long haul, that stuff it's just kind of noise. You really have to learn how to adapt training to the circumstances of your life. Yeah. Which you have to do all the time.
And it translates to life too. Like it just makes, translate. So would you say lifting is more art than science or a little both?
I think programming has a lot of art to it because you have to be creative and you have to elicit an emotion. There's some people who don't really care. They're just like, give me my 3x5s, give me my 3x8s, whatever, I'll do it. It's great. But when someone is bought into their program, it becomes more effective and the relationship improves. So I think a good coach knows how to program based on what a client's goals are and what makes them feel good about themselves and invested in their training that makes it more successful.
Love it. All right. Last, or maybe second to last question would be for any women listening to this right now. She knows she wants to get stronger. She's very inspired. You know how this is. Like you hear a podcast, you're energized, and then it falls away if you don't do something. What does she need to do to commit to this? What is the next achievable step?
I think you should get a coach. Yeah. And I say this because I am a coach, but and I'm a coach because this is what I believe in. I
agree. I'm sure you have coaches too.
Yeah, I have a coach for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So many times I get excited about something and then I start to research it and I get completely overwhelmed with all the things that people are telling me I should do. And before I know it, I haven't done anything. But a good coach will find out what's important to you. They will learn about what you have available to you and they will give you the recipe to get started. And that can be the biggest first step is like get someone to help you get started for your first week or your first month. And then you're going to be on a really good trajectory from there. But I think a coach is a great thing to outsource your training to because they have so much experience and that's what you hire them for. Hire them for their experience. They know better than you. It's like such a good way to respect your own time. If you respect your time, get a coach.
No matter how stubborn you are, get a coach. Trust me.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you know John Patrizzo?
Oh my gosh, I love him. Yes. I call him Dr. Cargo Shorts.
Yeah. Cargo shorts. Yes. He helped me out early in the year or last year with just coming up with a training program for like 1 month,
Yeah.
as I was dealing with some regression in my post-surgery situation. And again, I was being really stubborn. I'm like frustrated, hitting a wall. So I just got to get a coach. It wasn't even about money or anything. It was just my stubbornness.
Yep.
And way back when I started starting strength, I went to Cody Anino here in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
And like an hour, he fixed, months and months of bad habits,
Mm-hmm.
even though I read the books, watched the videos, did the thing.
Yeah.
So listen to what Nikki's saying.
Get out of your own way. Yeah.
Get a coach. All right. So I do like to ask this of all guests, and that is there anything you wish I had asked that we didn't cover? And
I always
so,
ask
what's your
people this
answer?
in their
Yeah.
PDC interviews. Let me think how I want to phrase this, because I know you're just going to ask me after I tell you.
You could just go right into the answer if you want. It's fine.
Well, I'm thinking of, it seems like every year, or I don't know, every stretch of time, there's like a theme in my own lifting or in my coaching. And the one that's coming up for me now is just really appreciating time and how important appreciating that as a variable is. It's one that we have no control over. And so the best you can do is appreciate what it can do for the other things that you do have control over. And I keep seeing this as like an example in when I'm programming the deadlift and when I'm doing my own deadlift. It does so well when I don't load it heavy every single week. It needs time. And same thing with nutrition. Your choices, they're hard at the day, they're hard for a week. But if you let that pile up for 3 weeks and 6 weeks and 2 months and 3 months and 4 months, stuff happens. But you can't control time. And it's one that you can only appreciate after you've been doing this for so long. And you can feel how it becomes a really special part of your training, because it also makes you realize, oh, I have time. I don't have to force this PR right now. I don't have to do a significant deficit. I can do a more conservative deficit. I have time. So really appreciating how that can be. It can't be something that you ignore. You have to include that in how you're thinking about things.
Yeah. So guys, Nikki just reframed a constant fixed variable that we always think of as limitation into an advantage.
Yeah.
Of like, you go through the process and let it percolate, let it marinate, let it ruminate, whatever the word is over time. It's so good. Yeah.
Thanks for saying that so eloquently.
No, you said it. You said eloquent. I just built off of it. Yeah, you should do a whole like episode about that on Beast Over Burden. Just talk about time.
We keep bringing it up, and I think that's why it's just like, how am I putting so much gravity on this moment versus what if I let myself think of not just this one moment, but the next 3 weeks, and how does that change the pressure of this decision? That's an important one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if this helps or not, but the more you give yourself the time to grow, probably the more time you'll have in your life. Like literally your lifespan and your health span will be longer. So you're almost getting a payback for that investment.
Yeah. That is nice to think about. Yeah. To me, that just feels like a relief.
Yeah.
You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You have to take action. But again, there's never an end. It's just infinite until you die.
Love it. All right. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, really, really so much fun. I'm so glad that we connected and that we were going to have you on the show.
Thanks for having this podcast.
Yeah. No, it's a labor of love. It came out of my own passion before I ever got into coaching or anything. So keep it going.
Nice.
Where should people find you? I want to send them to the best place.
So I'm on Instagram. I haven't figured out a good way to say my Instagram handle yet.
Nikki.in.the.gym.
Thank you. Yeah, I just need a rapper.
Right.
I need a hype boy. But yeah, Nikki in the gym. It's Nikki with 1K. There's a period between each word. I'm also at barbelllogic.com/team. You can just Google Nikki Sims. I think my image search history, there used to be another Nikki Sims that would pop up when you typed that, but she is the Nikki with 2Ks, and we have very different jobs.
Okay. And now I'm curious, but okay.
And on YouTube, I'm also Nikki Sims in the gym.
Got it. And of course the podcast.
Yeah. Yes. Come to our podcast. We're Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic. I'm sorry for the worst delivery of where can I find you answers ever.
Not at all. Don't worry. I'm just going to edit it all out. I'm just kidding. No, it's all good. It's all good. We'll include those in the show notes as always. Really solid. So much fun. If anybody has questions, you guys should reach out to Nikki for just to answer the question, to say hi, she will respond to you.
Love it. You can go to
if you need a coach, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to learn, and I'm in the abundance mindset of online coaching. Like, love that people are able to do that now. If you want to do a call with us, you can go to barbelllogic.com/experience. It's a free call with a coach. Again, I just want people to get coaching, and that's a way for you to see what it might be like with us or with whoever. So check that out too.
100%.
Yeah.
All right, Nikki, it's been so much fun. It's been awesome. We're going to get a lot of people strong, bulky, jacked, whatever phrase hits
Thick.
with you.
Down with the thickness.
Yeah, lets it down with the thickness. Yeah, I like it. All right, Nikki, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.